So I'm curious then about this idea here that we're talking about, that like information you don't believe should be free, or sorry, you believe information should be free and sort of freely exchanged, but it's the right to that everyone should then have the right to like pull the shutters down essentially on their information. So how would that work in cyberspace? Like, would we each be like in a totally like ideal or theoretical world? Like, how would that even theoretically work?
Exactly. That's where kind of the old Austrian economic take on privacy and human action is works really well in meat space, and it's well established long like early 2000s and such. Whereas the cypherpunks manifested the same concept in cyberspace as a reality, right? So, what is cyberspace? What is the internet? The internet is basically a connection of computers, right? So, physical hardware, physical wires. People own the physical atoms that make up these wires, and they are exclusive, scarce resources, right? The one, whatever you do on one computer, you like, there's limited resources available to compute. So whoever either builds or buys the hardware has full ownership on it and can therefore use that physical material for however he pleases. And that is where software comes in, because software is a pattern that you repeat on your physical machine, and you transform the pattern and you calculate with it, right? That computing, literally, right? Solving a program, an algorithm, that's changing patterns, and nobody owns these patterns, right? Um, People own the machines, the physical computers, but the software in and of itself is just numbers, 1, 2, 3. Nobody owns the number 1, 2, 3. Doesn't matter how large the number gets, right? Um, but then we can combine our computers to so that they replicate patterns across each other, right? So if you want to copy or move information from one place to the other, both inside one machine as well as across multiple machines over a network, you can copy files in a way that you can verify that the other guy now has the exact same pattern down to the very last bit, and that's magical, right? We can literally share patterns perfectly with computers. And again, sharing patterns is an inherent human trait, right? That's what we do. We interact with each other and share what we learned. Um, but now the problem is like how if I would like, for example, in this network of computers, I forward my package from one computer to the other and to the next and to the next and so on until it reaches the
Mhm.
destination. It's roughly how the internet works. Well, now all of these people in the middle, they get to see my pattern, right? Um, but maybe I don't want to like share them that pattern. Maybe that's some sensitive information, like just a private chat conversation or some financial statement or your Bitcoin private keys for that matter, right? Some really important piece of pattern. Maybe you don't want to tell it to them, right? And you don't have to. Like you're not obligated to tell anyone anything, right? It's your body, it's your hardware. You can tell them what you want. Um, but still, if you tell them some stuff, it's useful, right? Because they can, for example, relay your packages. So now the trick is how can you um, have a pattern that can be given to someone else so that the actual pattern that he receives just is uncomprehensible. It's just gibberish, it is not readable. But for anyone who has kind of a secret piece of information, a secret pattern, a password, basically, just for whoever has that knowledge in addition to the gibberish, that person can transform that pattern into what's actually meaningful, right? And that's the gist of encryption, right? To change a pattern from something that's humanly readable, just a piece of clear text, change it into some gibberish, send the gibberish around to other people, right? And that's how you choose to reveal yourself. Instead of sending the clear text, you send the ciphertext, the gibberish, knowing that only the person who knows a certain secret can transform the pattern from ciphertext into clear text to actually get the um, kind of readable thing. And so that's where the cypherpunks came in. Like, yes, we are sharing a lot of information here, and the information is recorded on computers, and they're massive amount of information. But um, we can change the patterns that we communicate in clever ways so that it limits the people who can read the message, right? And that's a very interesting concept.
Hmm. Okay, so do you think people can own, yeah, a sequence of numbers? Like, is like, because okay, so obviously it's a little more intangible in the internet. So I want to try and like bring it back to like a slightly more analog place in order to like get my head around the concept and exactly what you're sort of in favor of here. So the like you can't own the words, all the words that go into a great novel. But if you're the one that puts the words in those sequence, like you own the intellectual property of said novel. Or the cypherpunk or cypherpunks. That's a weird word to say. I've just realized how like tongue twisty that is. Um, is that do they not believe, or do you not believe that anyone can own like a series or a specific series of numbers or words or a bit of information? Like is intellectual property in that way just non-existent in their sort of conception of the ideal world?
It's not just non-existent, it's counter logical or just illogical, and it depends on the word own.
Okay.
Do you own a certain piece of information, right? And ownership means exclusion, meaning that other people cannot use that thing,
Mm.
right? But if I own the number 123, you can still think of the number 123, right? It's not impossible. Either you come up with it, or you ask me for a copy, right? So that's, you can know a certain piece of information. You can create a new pattern that we've assumably not seen before, right? Um, Probably the pattern that you created was discovered a long time ago by someone already, right? So actual creation of patterns is very, a new creation of a new pattern is very difficult. Um, uh, but that's not a bad thing, Copying someone else's pattern is great. That's how patterns work. That's how information works, right? Where the problem with intellectual property in my mind is that where it tries to protect someone's ownership in information, it actively harms someone's ownership in actual physical scarce resources, right? So let's think of a book. I write
Yeah.
presumably new pattern in long form in text. It's a novel, right? Um, and I come up with this pattern, and I buy a piece of paper, right, a physical scarce resource. I buy it honorably, and now I write in my own time with my own ink and my own pen. I write this pattern on there, right? And now I give you the book, right? So again, the physical pages are scarce resources, and when I sell you the book and you give me money, we're exchanging the scarce resource in the actual paper for the scarce resource of the money. But the pattern itself is um, like, so in another example, if you now would get your own piece of paper, your own ink, and
Mm.
on your own time you write the exact same pattern on there, right? um, Now, have you taken anything away from the quote unquote original author? No, right? It's not his paper, it's not his ink, and he still has his pattern, right? But now when the original owner can come after you and say, hey, you're not allowed to write that pattern down, I take your book now, right? All of a sudden, your property rights in the paper and the ink that you honorably bought and that you advanced with your entrepreneurial genius of writing, which is actually quite a genius trait, uh, that's now taken away from you, right? So we try to establish a sort of ownership of information, which is why, like, we have private property only because we live in a conflicting situation, right? We have conflict. Different people want to use the same resource for different things, and we need to solve that conflict. Therefore, we use property rights, right? Whoever gets it first, or whoever builds it, or whoever exchanges voluntarily for it, that's the only person who gets to make the decision of the one task where that mean can be allocated to, right? But with information, there is no constraint, right? Everyone can copy all the information and nobody is going to lack anything. And that's like with a PDF document. I just copy a PDF document over to you, or now the data that we send over to you, like, copying is nearly like nothing, a couple joules of electricity, and that's it. So that's why would we limit ourselves and introduce artificial scarcity in the beautiful superabundance of cyberspace, where information longs to be free, right? That intellectual property, just in its concept, tries to hinder that, tries to put this infinite realm of possibility of patterns and build boxes around them, and then build walls where it's not required.
Okay, so I've got like I have quite a conflict going on in my head about this right now. So so I'm a like all my work's on the internet. Everything's free, available to get. All my stuff forever, right? And my podcast that I run, I sell ad space on it, but this podcast that we're on right now, actually. um, so and I don't want to be one of those people that paywalls their content. I don't like the idea of like Patreon subscriptions that allow extra things. I'd rather like everyone just be able to hear it all, because eventually I want, the conversations I'm having to be useful to people. So I would like to give that utility to the world for free. So like I'm totally on board with the whole information should be free thing. Yeah. Yeah, but so can I like right, sorry. But I want to lay out like my conflict here, and then we can talk about you can sort of, yeah. So then at the same time, right, I'm an author, and I wrote one book, I've written a second book that's almost finished at the minute. It's about the GameStop saga, and like they've both taken about a year of my life almost um to put together. And whilst they haven't become the first one or the second one yet wildly successful, um, I would like to think that I will be financially rewarded if I do a good job, and that therefore I'll be able to take the time to do the next thing. Um, so I'm curious as to like how in this space do you envision that people, artists, creatives of any form survive, musicians, writers, podcasters, anything? Because like if you're saying that everything has to be free, which I love on one hand, right? How can we make sure that there are people creating and not starving?
Exactly, that's the crux of the issue, and I think it's so conceptually difficult because, as I said earlier, right, even though we can, in theory, differentiate between scarce and non-scarce goods, in perceived reality, it's very closely intermingled, right? So, sure, information is free, but it takes a long bloody time to write the book, right? And your time is scarce. Your attention, you can only apply it to one thing at a time, and so if you write a book, you cannot build a house because you are sitting, on the keyboard writing, and you can't be cutting wood and stuff. So there is a sacrifice in writing the book, absolutely, right? And there is a conflict of where you should spend your time, writing the book or going to cut the house, right? Um, and yes, a financial reward can be a very useful tool to help you deciding which of these tasks is more valuable. If you build a house and someone's going to pay you 100 Bitcoin for it, I mean, obviously, right, that's a good deal. But
Well,
on
it
the other
depends how
hand,
nice the
if
house
you
is.
try to exactly, if you try to write a book and you sell it, right, and you get 10 Bitcoin out there, maybe, right? Well, which of those should you invest your time in, right? I mean, financial reward is not everything, right? Maybe you really want to write that book and you're not that good of a builder, maybe. And,
Yeah.
or at least you don't enjoy it that much, right? There's a lot of other considerations, but now at least you have feedback from someone else. Someone else is going to pay you 10 times as much if you build him a house rather than write him a book, right? That's a nice way to help you choose the ends, and which is a very difficult problem. Um, but so and now another way to tackle this is, what do you actually want to achieve, right? And if what you want to achieve is, I want to, I have a message, I have a pattern, and I want to tell it to many other people, and for them to actually listen and to pay attention, so that they can use this pattern and improve their lives, be better humans, and help me out in cool ways that I can't even expect yet, right? Something like this is probably the end goal of many podcasters. Very admirable, right? That's a psychological question, right? So let's assume that is answered. Now the economic question: how do you go about doing that? Right? You have two different strategies. One is tell the pattern to anyone who wants to listen. Done. Right? The other is tell the pattern only to the people who pay you $50 over PayPal. You know, um, just how are you going to achieve your goal if you limit your means such drastically, right? Like you reduce the potential size of people that are going to listen drastically, right? So is if your main goal is I want to get a lot of money, um, I would argue that's not a good enough end goal. Ask yourself why 4 times, and then you might have something reasonable, right? If your goal is I want to spread the message and convince people of what I preach, then do it for sure in the free way. But what I've experienced personally is that once you give, you receive, and especially in the terms of non-scarce information. The more non-scarce information you put out there, the more you speak, and the more you refine your speech, the more like the exponentially more impactful is going to be the feedback that you get. Not just like mainly in refining the pattern and improving it, because guess what, your pattern isn't beautiful, it sucks, and you can do it a lot better and a lot more elegant, but you can't do it alone. You will need a lot of fresh inputs from other people to refine whatever you're articulating in whatever you do, just because doing stuff right is really difficult, and doing it alone is exponentially more so. And so um, and now the kind of the interesting way is now how do we build a system where information is treasured and where it is free, and shared broadly, but still the creators, the people who actually manifest these new patterns, who curate them, who advance and refine them, how do we still reward them for their time? And here I think instead of trying to put the old physical property right concept into cyberspace, we should just embrace what cyberspace is and realize that just because something is non-scarce does not mean that it's not a good. There's an economic good and there's an economic bad, two different things, right? A good is something that's useful. A bad is something that's not useful, right? A good gets you towards your end goal, whereas a bad hinders you in it. There's an economic difference in these two terms. But information is a non-scarce good. It's not a non-scarce bad. I mean, it can be, right? There can be bad information that actually hinders you. A lie basically is that. Whereas a non-scarce good is actually useful information, right? So, and again, valuation is subjective in the individual. So the people who receive your pattern, right, they might gain a very in-depth understanding of whatever it is you want to convey. And that helps them in their everyday lives, right? If you show someone how to fish, that's a very useful pattern to be able to repeat later. And they're going to be very thankful because what you provided to them, even though you didn't sacrifice the information, you still provided them a good. It was still useful for them. And they are still grateful for that and have respect for this. And I think what's just missing is to give people a nice opportunity to give back. Right? We can give back with non-scarce goods, like I'm going to press the like button. That's basically non-scarce. It's just a click, and the number in the database. And sure, that's nice, gets you to cheat the algorithm and whatnot, but that's not really it. I don't think that's good enough. And like where Bitcoin comes into this picture is Bitcoin is a good that you can give back. It's a scarce good, meaning you actually sacrifice something. Right? But hey, that's good, because if you really value something, then you should sacrifice something to attain it. That's going to make it actually more meaningful. So with things like podcasting 2.0 and now having the ability to add your Lightning node public key, basically your Bitcoin address, into your RSS feed, everyone who is listening to your free content that you just put on your server and let anyone download through the RSS feed, right? Anyone who wants to can push back some Satoshis as a token of gratitude, right? As a thank you. But notice, this is not a certain price set for the revelation of information. That's if this was valuable for you, give me back something valuable. and maybe make it match, somewhat adequate for the value that I gave you. Give me something, maybe even more valuable back. That would be a fair exchange, right? And it's basically a donation, for the effort done. I would think of it like this, but I think what was lacking is just a good money to do it within cyberspace. That's Bitcoin, and a nice user interface and just a culture around doing that. And I think we're working on that with podcasting 2.0.
Okay, I want to ask you about this podcasting 2.0 in a second here, but I just want to like go over the last couple things on this topic. So you're essentially saying that we should, in this idealistic world, at least anyway, or in theory, be giving up all our stuff on the internet for free and hoping that the people who benefit from it will, yeah, tip in kind, essentially, that they'll pay as they feel you've earned it, as a giving back rather than a sort of prefaced give me this money for my information sort of thing. Do you think we can trust people's judgment of what is good and worth money? Like, obviously, because obviously there's the market will figure out a certain amount of things, but like the best journalists, for example, that I follow, are not the ones with the most followers. The best paid journalists in the world are the worst. Like, really, the best paid journalists in the world are the worst, right? And I mean, like, a journalist, we'll put that in air quotes. But like, do you trust people to sort of adequately reward the right information and the right people?
Um, I think only individuals actually know what's valuable for them and what's more valuable than something else, right? That's a subjective marginal value judgment. Um, I think they're only the individual knows. Like, I don't know if you prefer steak to bananas. No clue, but you do, right? And of course, that's just a simple example. In actual reality, it's infinitely more complex. Um, but and to the point of, is this the only way to do it? No, right? This is about privacy. This is about how do you reveal yourself to the world, right? And this is a strategy question, right? So that's why I set the premise at first. If your goal is to reach many people, then obviously giving the information to whoever wants it is better than restricting it to many people, right? But maybe that's not your goal. And that's all right, right? I'm not making a value judgment whether that goal is good or not. That's a psychological question, right? If your goal is like share a certain pattern only with a very small dedicated group of people, so that you get a high level of feedback and a very dense feedback, without putting too much of your public reputation on the line, right? That's an end goal, like, sure. And then the way that you reach that is by not telling this to everyone, but to only tell it to a couple people, right? And how do you decide which people to tell it to? Well, maybe there are some personal reasons, like it's your friend, or some business reason, like it's your colleague, but maybe it's financial reasons, right? You only reveal that information to people who pay you. That's a great curation mechanism, right? And it works, of course, especially great when it comes about your time, right? So as soon as you have a live conversation like this one, right? Right now I'm talking to you, I can't do something else, right? So for this, absolutely, you're like, I'm selling my time, right? But if it's a recording, and it's in cyberspace, that's something different. And here's kind of where it turns into a cost benefit analysis, right? If it costs you a lot to kind of replicate the information, then yes, you're going to have higher barriers to entry with whom you share it, because every sharing costs you. And that was the case with hand scribed books. Like, it takes you a year to write a beautiful book. I mean, what like that's expensive. Printing press made it easier, and now cyberspace made it trivial. So we've continuously reduced the cost of copying information, right? And that's great. That's awesome, right? We have much more abundance. We have much more accessible information, much more refined techniques. It's incredible, just that aspect of reducing the cost to copy. And I just think we should double down on it for many things, not for everything, obviously, right? And that's where encryption comes in. Like, you talking to your spouse, maybe you don't want to share that to the entire world, right? So encrypt it to your spouse's private key, right? And voila, only she can read it. And that's kind of how the cypherpunks go about this, right? Now that the cost is so cheap and everyone can just copy everything and keep it and remember it and search it and index it and curate it, right? What do we do with the stuff that we don't want to share? Because we don't want to share everything. Like that's the point. If the strategy would be everything must be released free and open source for everyone, right? There's no longer choice involved. That just makes you a slave of some weird free software king. But so yes, it's definitely about strategy, and there are numerous ways to go about it. But I'm just continuously surprised how good the strategy is that is coherent to this principle of non-scarcity. Like if you just put your information out there and you ask people, hey, give back how much you think is meaningful, like you get back decent amount. I mean, I'm talking to you from a microphone that I fundraised with some Bitcoin QR codes and YouTube videos, and
No way,
like
that's cool as fuck, man.
Yeah, and like you, especially now with this podcasting 2.0, I did old school, actually showing QR codes in the videos. It's super cumbersome, but still some people did it. But now there are just apps where you just say, okay, 100 satoshis every minute to the podcast creator, and it gets automatically split up. 80% to the creator, 10% to the editor, 5% to a nonprofit foundation, and 5% to the app who develops it. And just whenever you press play, there's a payment, and I look on my side of the wallet, and I just see exactly when people are listening right now, and they like it so much that they give me the most magical, precious cyberspace money that we've ever come up with in Bitcoin, right? It's like that's such a massive token of respect and gratitude that people give me, and often it's substantial amounts. Especially if your podcast is up and running. Of course, just it's a numbers game. But the cool thing is you don't need to be big, right? Sure, the big guys will get hundreds of donations every month, but if you're small and you have like 100 listeners, but 10 of them really like it, and 10 of them make a decent but small amount, that sums up. And you can get it without having an advertisement deal, without being the biggest guy who jumped on top of the algorithm, right? Like, as long as there's a couple people out there enjoying your content, they can send money, and it goes to you and only to you. And you choose how to split it up among other people.
Okay, I'm gonna have to look more into this. I'm definitely gonna check this out. Yeah, that sounds really interesting.
Valueforvalue.io. Value number 4 value.io.
Value for value.
Yes, and
I'll stick that in the description below for people as well.
And the Podcasting 2.0 podcast by Adam Curry and Dave Jones is two of the guys who were quite influential in building podcasts per se. And then they were like, hey, look at this weird Bitcoin thing. How about we put the two things together and let them kiss? And that's Podcasting 2.0. And it's like, it's something. Like it really feels magical.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment for us in the comments below. Let me know what you thought and if you'd like to see more of this from the show. Thank you, and we'll see you again next time.